blustery crickets is all I gotta say. We're really coming into the fall. It's coming quick, folks. Keep alert. Keep them in a little cage. Make sure you feed and water them. Does anybody see this coming down that cares? And before I forget, almost every week now, after I said I was going to keep on doing it, here's the Pastcast code for those of you on Pastcast. You can refer to this number, just put it into the search engine with Behind the Woodshed, and it should come up with the Blogcaster page, so you can follow with the links that I'll post post-production. I do this every week. A lot of information to keep researching. If you just take up what I'm saying and want to find yourself interested in starting to getting involved in trying to turn the tide here, this is BTW RLM 178. BTW 178. So I get it. One day I'm going to make it just right. So BTW RLM 178 for the Pastcast. Get you to the search engine. Get you to all the links on the Blogcaster, given that it's up and continuing. And along those lines, well, thank you very much for all those who have donated, allowing Grimner to decide to also put us up on SoundCloud. So we're apparently up on SoundCloud now. The Real Liberty Media Network broadcasters are out there. So we're getting more and more places to go. I'm hoping we get, more and more live places to be. The simulcast, that would be kind of nice. Just to get the word out. And for what that word might be from Behind Woodshed is your evolutionary engagement. Not sitting around complaining and whining about it. Not sulking in your past failures or your beatdowns that you've all experienced. I should have told you a whole lot as well. Anyway, I mean, just by its own. And then we should have, it took me a while too. I'm no spring chicken about any of this stuff for sure. It certainly took a dedicated path. When I got beat down, I said, wait a minute, this is not America. What happened to that? And boy, hasn't that been a real eye-opener. And then at some point I decided I was going to try and turn the tide and figure out the ways of doing it, watching other people fail, watch what the tools were that were used against them to cause them to fail. And so here I am decades later, broadcasting on a friend's suggestion that I just talked to you about, because I can reach more people than the people I was dealing with at the time. Those of you that have been with me for years and years have heard this. I mean, I can only deal with so many people at a time, with their own problem, that I wasn't going to, at the time, able to get much information out, even though on a one-by-one basis, people were learning. And so I came with the thought, even though I was kind of reticent to do so, to tell you all what I had found. And that's the only way I could figure to do this, is to not tell you how much I know, but what I've been finding. And then have you understand that there's a way that I'm finding, there's a way to apply it. And so this is what we come here. I come here every week, and I suppose so all to y'all, to come and listen, and I'm just hoping we move it beyond my talking and your thinking and your learning into action. And I just assure you, as soon as you get into proper action, lots of things start changing, and a lot of it's kind of an interesting subtlety that goes on. Just remember, those of you that are doing this, it's not an overnight thing, although at times we get these big revolutionary type changes, sea changes in people. We get that every once and again, but most of your success is so subtle you don't really see it. It's like watching time. It's watching the hour hand move on a clock. I mean, it just doesn't seem like much is going on yet. You blink and all of a sudden it's another hour, and things have happened and things have changed and things have gone to the place that you have been initiating your intention into. And so it's not just researching and learning, it's learning where to put it and how to put it. I think I have something to say about that through my experience. Not that I know so much, and I'm not so genius about it. It's just that dedicating myself to stop whatever was up against me, I think I've learned a thing or two to be able to tell you, those of you that take this on. So I come here again every week to let you in on it. However good or bad it's been, I don't get too much conversation on that. I assume I do get support in how I'm doing this. It's just I always wonder because I just don't see I guess I really want to see us as people stand up and take this thing back and put it back in the place that it's supposed to be, this thing we call government, the they. Remember, government's just this shell. Don't get all wrapped up with this. And it was usurped by a bunch of criminals. These are literal criminal minds in these places. It's hard to believe that. I say that and I still don't want to believe that. The word caucustocracy just rises to the top because that's the excrement we deal with in these situations. But it's not a government we're actually fighting. It's the people inside of that are doing their darndest against us. And we sit as crickets. We sit in silence, thinking everything's kosher. And that part, I just don't understand that part, and I don't understand the excuses around that part. I understand the pressures of life. I tell you, that's what they've caused on you as well, is also your burden to bear, given you choose to try to stop something you see wrong. Something. So anyway, we do what we can, and so I've been trying to figure out as I go through all these years how to communicate all this to you. I take what we think is the news, which now has expanded even into the internet as far as even so-called alternative media. And I realized, boy, I wasn't really media. I really am not. But I can use these stories and the things that people pick up and discuss in different ways. One is to tell you what they want, again, to look at the system, look at what they want you to know, what they want you to think. We see the games being played, to look through that, to see the thing that's transparent to you, to expose it, and see whether or not at some point, if that interests you, to stop that harm, that thing you see now that they were trying to keep transparent from you, stop that thing that most people don't see as hurting you, which necessarily means when you go talk about it, people will think you're nuts. They think you're seeing the ships out coming into the bay. What are those 3 ships? The shaman said, and the other Indian said, I don't know, I don't see no ships. That's who you become. And you have to respond nonetheless to what may not be so apparent, but you see certain evidences of. And so sometimes it's not so clear your path, but that's what I say. If you are interested, and you are focused on getting the right information, the right information shows up. We all have our pretty good filters if we're not insane. And I don't know if I can even say that we're not, but in any regard, when our lives when you see people being hurt down around you, then that part of our life is not cool. And that we have something we can do about. So, along those lines, and someone I refer to quite a bit, John Rappaport. He's I consider him a bit of an investigative reporter. He does quite a few articles on point. And he came up with another thing it's like a big disconnect that he comes up with like Jerry Day. I listen to Jerry Day's videos and I'm saying, if someone had the time, I don't have the time to do this, but if someone would just take down the points that Jerry Day speaks and attach them to the thing he's complaining about in a remedy, a certain complaint form and put it in a certain place, he has the elements of the cause against us, that people work together in this regard. People with the clear, concise communication can work with people who can take that like a baton in this race I keep telling you that we're in, that we have to keep running because we don't know whether we're laughs or whether or not we're so far behind we're first or what. But we got to keep running. Because we just don't know, we don't know the guy, if there is someone in front of us, they just might not get a leg cramp and we eventually persist and win the race. That this baton between investigation of the facts and grabbing that baton and running the rest of the race has to be picked up. That I saw this, another story, as I hear in Jerry Day's work, some of the discussion I had and the disconnect, and even that has to be looked at, but for the most part, you have elements of violations against us. That if we the people would pick all these things up, use this work that people do, we would become much more formidable, quicker, and more on point, and less able to be disregarded. That John Rappaport made another discussion called Mandatory Vaccination in California. Let's School a Federal Judge was the title of his article. And I went and started reading through it, and I said, yeah, okay, it's a good title, but it doesn't finish. See, there's no one taking this baton. He doesn't even take the baton. Not a criticism of John. He's done the work to bring the elements out. He's brought the understanding. You may have to come with this and look and say, hey, this is a big, serious problem that I want to help. I couldn't do that work, but I can do the next step. Or maybe I know someone that can do the next step. That I was wanting to touch this a little bit more in the application side. John Rappaport brings out the elements. He says he wants to let's school a federal judge, and I'm saying, well, there's a process for so-called schooling a federal judge, and this article won't do that. And yet we take the information that's the awareness that John Rappaport has, and we have someone that then takes that baton and goes to the proper place. They can so-called school the federal judge, but in a way that actually can do something. More than just talking to the rest of us on the internet, or just talking to the singing to the choir, or conducting the choir, whatever analogy or metaphor you want to use. So he says a mandatory vaccination is what, remember I was speaking about that, I think it was last week. He's all over this stuff timely, is about as much as I can be, but he writes a lot more about particular ideas. And he says, Judge Sabraw, here's something you didn't know about the DPT shot, was his subtitle. And so he's got the intention to school a federal judge, and I'm thinking, well, there's a certain way you can do that. Now, you may have to take a little bit of the attitude out of it, but there is a mechanism that you can use, that anybody can actually use. That if we use some of these better investigative reporters that pull out the actual elements, can pull together the facts, you then take those facts and links and you look at the material, you compile a statement that takes the facts, places them in a certain form, and approaches a court, so-called, and understand that advisedly I'm speaking definitely through the corruption that sits there, but we can speak to that too. I've given you some hows, that we take what maybe someone like John Rappaport or a Jerry Day does, we compile them in a certain thing, and we approach the federal court. Now, one of the ways that you school any court, give it whatever, let's get beyond the jurisdictional stuff and what I've told you about those problems, is that you have what's called an amicus curiae. That's a friend of the court brief. In other words, you come in aid of the courts. Whether or not this is the judge or not is a whole other thing, but the court's interests to find justice. And see, when you leave it up to these judges by themselves, they're going to find what's appropriate underneath the guidelines of the Bar Association, as I keep telling you, our court case proved out perfectly. In 2013, we enjoined these very same people from doing what they do this way, finding the international imposition of servitude, treating everyone by human rights and not the rights that men are entitled by at least the United States, entitled before the fact, not after the fact, as conditioned by the same bar members. But we bring this as an amicus to the court to school the judge. Now, we can't walk in there and say, we're going to school you, judge. It's not going to work so well. But we say, as a friend of the court, I'm going to bring some points here that the negation or failure to observe of which is creating a gross injustice to the entire society. We'd like to advise the court on these things. Please give us leave to file our amicus, our friend of the court. So gross injustice is not conducted here. Other things can be said. Don't say on and on. I mean, there's other ways to say the same thing, and you get maybe a list of 3 or 4 things that are supreme injustices that you list, so that makes it real hard for them to disregard. Now, you may have to have some sort of an authority when you place the amicus, but the facts that you have may be authority enough that you can so-called school the judge, that the report that John Rappaport makes on its own before the internet does nothing. But if he could turn this into one of what I'm saying, even just as a minimal approach, not getting more engaged than being a friend of the court. In other words, the other option would be to require that you be joined because you're an indispensable party. You develop your standing to be part of the case. That's another way to do this. but to be the more innocuous and more least jeopardizing to you, and gives you a lot of experience on how this works, is you would become someone who advises the court on what was missing in its dialogue over agreeing that these vaccines in California could be mandatory on everyone. And I'm just referencing this vaccine subject matter. It can be anything that does this. So please don't think that this is just, we're talking about vaccines here. I'm talking in subject matter of remedy, a subject matter that could be the remedies of which can be about any subject matter that you see these gross deficiencies at least. And I have to be careful on the words, because when you get into an amicus, you have to be the friend of the court. So you got to throw down any animosity you have. You have to really, and for me, it's a little bit hard. I really have to work hard to work that through a bit, but I work it through. It's what you see that in your multiple edits as you're running through your brief. So John has this report. He's got this story coming down, and he says his intention is to school the judge. And I'm saying, John, do it. You know, I'm reading the story. John, great. This is what we need to see. We need to see this in all areas. But here's what he writes, and I'll read just the first part of this just to give a setup that maybe I can help you and any of you that are interested in these kinds of things. And then listen, this vaccine thing is a serious matter. They went to the police powers in this like they went to the police powers against the minor in California. So don't think that this is not the same, almost identical problem that we have with these bar association members. So how do we school the judge? Well, let's look at what John Rappaport says here and see if maybe some of you can see and applied maybe to some other subject matter, if not vaccines or health or anything that's within the state's police powers that they're using to beat you down, that they've got wrong, that they're using as a pretext to actually put in another agenda instead of what would be actually good for society in respecting people. I'll repeat myself a bit here, he says, in case you missed it. He's got a link to his last article. Then and I think we might have read a little bit of that as well. So it's not like I'm not integrated with what John puts together. So let me get to the reading here instead of my talking. I'll repeat myself here a bit in case you missed my last article. Then I'll get into something else, something dangerous that a federal judge knows nothing about. Federal Judge Dana Sabra is overseeing a lawsuit against mandatory vaccination in California. So far, Sabra has denied a petition to suspend mandatory vaccination for school children while the case moves forward. He believes tradition and history are on the side of forced vaccinations. That's because he doesn't know what he's talking about, or he's just making it up out of thin air. Those are two very valid points that you'd have to ameliorate a little bit, because again, you're the friend of the court. You're like speaking in his ear, giving him an insight that he might have missed. You can say making it up out of thin air in an interesting way that can soften that fraud. But anyway, so he goes on to write here, as the LA Times reports, and you get a link there. So if anybody's not really interested in the subject matter but didn't know how he's pulling this together, he builds his case with these links. Quote, United States District Judge Dana Sabra in San Diego wrote the state legislature have, subquote, a long history of requiring children to be vaccinated as a condition to school enrollment, and for as many years both state and federal courts have upheld those requirements against constitutional challenge. Unquote. John Rappaport writes, I don't see how Judge Sabra's opinion could be more ridiculous. Why? Because the long history he refers to is quite different. The states have always upheld exemptions for vaccinations on several grounds: medical waiver, religious objection, philosophical objection. Hello, that's the tradition. SB 277, the new California law, goes against the tradition, to say the very least. SB 277 breaks new ground into allowing the state to operate as a medical fascist in the area of vaccinations. And so then he goes on and starts to run through the list of things that he believes this judge does not know. That would be something that if you chose to pick up, you'd qualify for yourself. Are the facts and the truth of it are something that needs to be regarded in this matter that the judge ought to know. But ought to have known is better to say, because they're public record. And if you sit down and take away your animosity against these vile people in the seats of decision, why? Because you want to be in there, you want to make it an effective communication, not just to the judge, but to everyone else now. It's a platform for everyone else to look on. And when you want to do this more correctly, that you can take what John starts to build here, and you can build up a case where you actually started out saying the court appears to have not known these things, is a nice way to start that. That you can take this John Rappaport's work in his intention to school the federal judge, which is just a rhetorical statement in my mind where it doesn't get fulfilled, but we can tag team our energy where he pulls essentially pulls the work together. All you have to do is qualify it. Then you decide which remedy you go, and you can bring this into the court, and you can make a record of the problem that's before the court, that the court may have not understood, though it was a public record, that is a gross injustice to not regard this thing that interferes with people's right to contract, associate, exempt their religious beliefs. Most of these are Article 1 prohibitions. I mean, and we had a little discussion in the chat, the RLM chat, and Circolo out of Denmark was saying, these are restrictions on the government, showing that these are not really the rights of the people. And she was right. This is what I've told you a long time ago. This is what you see, the Bill of Rights, when you look at it, how it was actually set up. This is and I said in the chat, does this remind you of what Washington, this General Washington was talking about, the government being a fearful master? These constitutions weren't necessarily written with the objective actually of the Declaration of Independence in mind. And I've gone through tons of this stuff. And so we have a fine line we're walking all the time with this. That not walking that fine line allows this fearsome master to be just that. And you're seeing it. You're seeing what they've done. I predicted what they would do in using police powers. I was hoping, beyond hope, that we the people would figure that out before the government did, and we lost that part of the foot race. I can tell that leg of the race we lost. I can tell you that. But you still hear me talking. I haven't quite folded. I haven't burnt down the woodshed yet, like the Burning Man was burnt down, the fallen burnt man. We still have something to say. We're still here. The only choice we now have is, do we come up against that oppression, or do we succumb to it? So, getting back to what we can do, this seemed to me a pretty interesting, easy way to tell you. There's really no excuse. John's done the work. You can pick it up, whether he wants to go on himself. You can now take his work and leverage his work into something that's actually viable, and starts to get these ideas, these things of failure, inadequacies, the injustice we complain about, exposed even more and even clearer, and trying to expose more of even the most blind. And I can only hope that action is enough finally when we do get this thing turned around, and partly why I continue. We are just not stepping into the things that we have to do. All the people I see complaining, if they would just reduce not their hysteria and emotion, but the facts on a piece of paper and submit, if I can call it submitting, for all of us that understand that, And interestingly, it pops in my mind, if you've been following the Kim.com extradition case, which is being streamed out of New Zealand, it's like a big deal first time. You'll listen to the Queen's Counsel talking about submitting. They submit. You go, we submit this. And in the context and the tenor of the meeting, of that hearing, you can just see what he's saying, that he's submitting to the decision of this man that's calling himself a judge. He's submitting their position to that man for determination. That's the submission that's going on. At any rate, just listen, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. But this is how you can start to understand what's really going on in these things. When you hand a decision, a question, an issue to someone else, you can't very well argue that they didn't have the right to do so, which is what I've told you what your applications do in the state for just about any benefit. You give up your law, if you had any, which you should have had, but you probably didn't because that's why you signed up for someone else's. For the other law you've actually signed a consent to. You can't very well then claim it's not there. This is what the inverse, supposed inverse logic of not voting. If you haven't voted, you don't have a right to complain. Well, I have a right to complain when I didn't vote and I didn't enter into your state, you came and attacked me. I have every right to complain if it's a mere complaint. So you can slow down and analyze these things a little bit better, but I'm trying just to show you, no matter where you are, wherever you think you are, there's enough information out right now that we could start becoming exorcised of these people by being exercised in what we need to do to out it all. So I think I've taken enough time. I keep thinking how long it takes me to discuss this and whether or not you're all now bored with how I'm talking about it, but I don't see enough people stepping up. And I just want to make sure, maybe I am talking too fast. If I talk a little bit slower and repeat myself a little bit more, maybe someone will be interested enough. Oh, that's what he's talking about. Not 10 years from now. No, right now when we need it. See, if we wait, though iron is hot here in this case, if we wait, we lose the opportunity. It is so, in my mind, when I read the rest of John's report and by some other stuff I've read, and there is a lot that got left unsaid. There's a big agenda being pushed that needs to have a big giant log stuck in its spokes. And you could be the one that pulls that off. And if not just you, you can pull together with other people similarly situated with this interest in the subject matter. I see there's thousands of people out there, and I'm looking and shaking my head. Why isn't anybody even trying this stuff? It's especially with an amicus where you don't have any jeopardy. The only jeopardy would be being told you're wrong. I mean, who cares? Who cares? The criminal will tell you you're wrong, trying to arrest them also. But the point is that others get to see that there's a way. Can you imagine if 1,000 people wrote into the court to say you're making a gross injustice on this point by disregarding these clearly established proofs? In this case, he's going off on the first part. You've misinterpreted what the real tradition is you were ruling on. As one, I wouldn't just go in there with just that one, but can you imagine 1,000 people doing this? A hue and cry over these issues? The courts would be outed at that point. And you've just established another platform in a legalistic sense, in a place that people recognize as authority. Because at some point you might be dismissed. But if you just came as a one-shot thing on this one case, you don't have anything more to prove, that the proof is self-evident in what you've presented. Now, I'm going to caution that, because if you are, we have to be very careful as a Jefferson Mining District. And those of you that are miners and listening in, we were talking a little bit at the Mining Association meeting on Friday, not the district meeting, which happens in another week, 2 weeks, but the Mining Association, SWOMA. We were talking a little bit about this and why Jefferson Mining District is not jumping into these cases so readily, is because when you do have a position that is long-term, and you go up inside these courts that have this decision that we know are completely corrupt and they have no actual authority, not only when you come in, that's not your argument, when you come in, if that is your argument and you come in, you're actually giving validity to that, which you realize is not valid, don't you? So there's this double-edged sword. You have to kind of decide which side of that sword do you want to play. And so for us, not recognizing and it's not our opinion, they've told us they have no jurisdiction. Why would we come in as an amicus to advise the court that doesn't have a jurisdiction? This is a absolute injustice going on. This is a trespass on that case. It's a trespass. It's a fraud on the court, which is not a fraud. It's a gross violation of the mechanism that would allow you to a just end. That we have to be very careful with ourselves to file these kinds of things when we hand them to a jurisdiction that's incompetent, firstly, but secondly, even if they had competency, see, they're in the seat of decision, and if they don't like what we're saying, they just disregard what we've said. And that diminishes us in the face of what law we have established. So for an organization like the Assembly has, a district, the government of Jefferson Mining District, I wanted you to know that if that's what you're doing, you have to be careful on bringing that in. You're up against a bunch of criminals, so you got to be careful. But for most of y'all who just have an investigation to present as information, you don't have to worry about that side of the sword. You just wield the one of truth and lack of adequate information handed to the court and fuller disclosure to the court of the actual condition that the parties may not have understood. And so now you see I'm softening this point on how you address this. You don't come in, you talk with authority on provable points, but you talk in a way that's suggestive of unknown defects and possible oversights and things like that. A lot of people can't handle that. A lot of miners can't handle doing that, but that's part of the game right now. Till we get the politics out of this thing and we start getting law to work in the first instance, this is what the problem is. This is becoming that politically correct speech in a judicial capacity should show you there's a problem. However, for most of y'all, I mean, I can't imagine there's many of you I know about that might even be interested. There's nothing here that you would have to shy away from in the context that we would have to consider as a miner's government mining district. That you couldn't take what John's doing here. And I just read you his intention. I read you the setup. I read you what his point of what the tradition is, the focus as he starts off here, and then he gets something dangerous, he says. I'd like to have you understand it gets better. That the proof has been laid out. I come every week. I lay you proofs. It depends on what subject matter I decide to talk about. If you were to take those elements, take an interest in those things and elements, and go to the agency or the judicial capacity or the officer or the code enforcement, whatever it would be, you take and you put these facts before them and the proper explanation, you will become 1,000 times more formidable than probably anybody I've ever heard ever doing a lot of this stuff. And I'm encouraging you to do that because otherwise, if we don't, for all the thousands and tens of thousands of brush fires that have started up around us, this will become a conflagration against us completely. We will be consumed by it. It's pretty bad now, but I still think there's again, when I see these things pretty quickly not addressed, I see the intention, but I don't see the follow through. I see our failure, and to me, it's just a matter of someone picking up the baton. It's like, here, John's run the first lap of this relay. Somebody pick this next thing up. And it doesn't have to be, again, on vaccines. Don't go away because, you hate hearing about vaccines. I've told you, I've seen some vaccines. I've seen the main problem is the amount of, how concentrated they come and the timing when it is. Not necessarily that a particular vaccine may be that terrible as against what it's fixing, but to put so much and so early in a little one's life seems to be a terrible, terrible crime. Now we have those studies as well, but I just want to let you know, for those of you that are vaccine vaccine, vaccine promoters. I'm not anti-vaccine. I'm saying we have problems that we have to solve, and they're driven by an agenda and seats of decision of people that I know that they have agreed with me they are criminal. And proof of that, Jefferson Mining District et al. Versus Kitzhaber et al. In 2013. When you get to Justia's site on the website, you'll see my name there, along with Ron Gibson and the Jefferson Mining District, which is the assembly. A bunch of other people, other miners in the district. In our lawsuit, stated that the Bar Association and the political parties violate you. And they did not answer, therefore agreed that they violate you. See, it's not, again, not opinion, but we haven't outed these people. We haven't exercised what we've been given in order to out these people as being criminals in the seats of decision, or at least get them to start acting a whole lot better and try and keep justice, a transparency to you by making you think that remember, they're only worried about the appearance of justice. As you think justice has been done, that's good enough, whether it's been done or not. And with it, they done you. They done you every time you turn around. And so, I think I'll move on with this. I know a lot of you going to sighing a big sigh of relief on that, aren't you? Maybe I insult that in you. I was going to move on here, but I just keep thinking, I don't see people doing this. And anybody who's thinking, oh, let's move on, folks, you should be thinking, where can I use this? But I just told you should be thinking, what in my life do I want to stop or help stop or get in the way of? And wow, he just gave me something. I could go find a court case, become somewhat of a knowledge and a factual presentation for a court that's getting away with crime because no one else wants to say this stuff. And you be the one that finds the right information, presents it in a more proper way to their sensibilities, however hard that might be. I mean not hard like hard, but I mean like how much you have to bite your tongue to do so. And you don't know that you're not the next one that did what needed to be done that no one else wanted to do. And I just think I see thousands of people that could be doing that. I don't know what a court would do when it gets 10 or 15 or 20 or 100 different pieces of information that all have the same omissions that were failed to come to the top that the parties would have discussed, that the judge overlooked and found contrary to whatever that facts would show that he or she would have had to respond to better. Remember, the crickets will suffer whatever comes on them. And in this case, when someone didn't come in to give what John identifies as a non-full disclosure of all the facts relevant and pertinent to the matter, that's a cricket. And an injustice most certainly comes from that. You also see in the failure of this judge to inquire on their own, which is now I have to start biting my tongue. You can't go tell them that. You just got to say it in a softer way. I don't like it, but it's what you have to do. Until we get these people back into offices that they're going to do law in the first instance, I don't know what more to say about that part. You're living in a country, and probably globally, you have actually no remedy in the fact that the remedies are there, but the people you go to for that decision are criminals. They actually design your life. And they use these omissions of information in order to do what's appropriate. As you heard the Bar Association documentation I read months and months and months ago tell you they are going to do. Notwithstanding the fact of the bar members being criminals, I'm not one to just throw them all in the same bucket. Some can swim out of the excrement and crawl off and clean themselves off and do something. And it may be that we have one that has done that. And so, for all the criminality, I will say the bar agrees they do. I'm always open for the attorneys to become lawyers and do law. See, we didn't enjoin the doing of law. We enjoin the crime that purports to be doing law. The as law. Remember those little as money, as law? You see it right in the statutes. These statutes act as law. They're not law. But a district attorney, regarding these vaccines, did that judge know this? That the district attorney, Nico LaHood, says vaccines cause autism. The Bexar County District Attorney, Nico LaHood, is making a bold statement about vaccines. And I saw a video of his. You may want to track it down. I don't know if you can get to it through this link that you'll get or not, because I'm Nico LaHood. The Hood, huh? Nico LaHood. I'm the criminal district attorney in San Antonio, Texas. I'm here to tell you that vaccines can and do cause autism. And he says this in a supposed promotional video of that movie Vaxxed. And he's got a son and daughter that were affected. That he directly attributes by looking at facts, because of his position as a prosecutor, to look at facts and come to where the conclusion of those facts leads him. He's making a statement about this. Does that judge in California know that? See, you've heard me say, did the judge read the product insert that says that these things cause seizures, then produce the evidence of little ones having seizures within hours of the shots? Does that judge know that? Was there anybody that was there to present that? I don't know. I'm not even looking that close. I'm just saying apparently it wasn't made prominent enough for sure. That does this a judge, a bar member in another state, with a robe, covered up with a robe, understand of one of his co-members, if you will, in the same brotherhood, has a contrary view by private experience, outside of his professional opinion? I thought that was just interesting. The anomalies pop up, and I've told you over and over, always investigate the anomalies. There's going to be truths underneath some of it. Now, my thought was that's the guy that needs to be the prosecutor. And so then I'm wondering, why isn't he? Why, he's an intelligent guy, it sounded like. Why doesn't he has the power of the place he's in to prosecute. Why doesn't he figure out how to prosecute these things, notwithstanding the agency professions that use state certification boards that may actually be able to be sued for not having all their doctors explain the product insert and fully explain the problems that come with these injections. Then allow the proper consent to be formed. Why doesn't he prosecute against the current condition? I don't know. I think he's smart. So what I was hearing, he's smart enough to have figured it out. And so I have a question. But that would have been I looked at that. Well, there's your prosecutor, folks. Okay, so we pick up who we can where we can. There's not very many of those good lawyers out there if this guy truly is a good lawyer. Notwithstanding my problem with him as a prosecutor generally. And I'm sure he takes advantage of everything he can in his little place because he's a politician too, remember? So this is not carte blanche acceptance. I'm looking at trying to solve real problems, notwithstanding the problem of the occupation that we're under. We take what we can get right now, but we're going to have to go out and get that. We can't just sit and do nothing. So I thought that was fascinating. It's just a heart-wrenching a bit watching this guy. He's people too, no matter what his profession, what his anticipation is. If I take him at his word, he's a good guy. It's heartbreaking to watch what his family goes through. If he's a good guy, it's courageous what he's doing. I'm saying step up better. Let's actually become effective in what we do, and he might be the prosecutor to do it. Those of you in Texas might want to tap that. For all of us that have ever said that chemotherapy was poisoning you just short of killing you, just enough to kill the thing that they want to, the cancer they think that they need to kill off in you, is that very toxin that they are producing for your consumption and so-called well-being, your welfare that the government underwrites and agrees to. The report's out now, chemotherapy warnings after deaths from cancer-fighting drugs. Now, why that? It has better power than what I've heard in some instances, so you don't think I'm still embracing this complete thing. Why certain cannabis and certain cancers can be treated successfully without death and preferred, I don't know. Which leads us into that discussion where the DEA would not adjust that meaning, that definition on a Schedule 1. I just gave you the guidance, how you change not an amicus brief, but your own comment to out the fraud of non-disclosure of the government's holding of beneficial uses of cannabis. And these things that they've actually licensed doctors to commit crime where these chemicals actually do kill you. What I've been saying, these not me solely, I'm just saying I have come to the conclusion years and years ago that chemotherapy was a way of selling lots of poisons to people under the color of treatment, and they were poisons that killed, would bring you near death, and if you survived, if you were tougher than the cancer that they were poisoning, you would make it. And then we find out it only lasts a little while, so I don't know how efficacious all that is anyway. But here's the report. Patients should be warned. Do you think should be? No, they were supposed to be. This talks to my point before about the vaccines and the district attorney prosecuting for doctors and the agencies and certification boards of the doctors not requiring disclosure. Patients should be warned about the dangers of chemotherapy after research showed the cancer drugs are killing up to 50% of the patients in some UK hospitals. That's a scary thought all on its own. Some UK hospitals. For the first time, researchers looked at the numbers of cancer patients who died within 30 days after starting chemotherapy, which indicates that the medication is the cause of death rather than the cancer. I'm not going to read more. You can get the broadcast. You can type it in. You can find all this stuff. I looked at that and said, well, there's your standard. How about all the people that used cannabis in 30 days and didn't die? Would be a better measure against the cancer treatments that they did die to show that medical marijuana, at least for cancer, was a better option. That was completely disregarded arbitrarily and capriciously by the DEA. See, in these stories you hear your standards that you can use if you didn't know them before. I didn't know that before. I'm telling you that's a standard that I would throw on a piece of paper just like I just stated. And I'm sitting here thinking about, I don't know how I do this, folks. I just know that's what works. That's how fast. It's not time consuming once you understand how this stuff is, what they're doing, what their approaches are, and how you can defeat them. It seems like everything they hand us is a weapon if we can take it away from them. Just like in a real war. Hand-to-hand combat, it seems, but it's done on paper. So, again, another chemotherapy kills, folks. What can I say about that? Maybe that'll be a heading I put somehow in the broadcaster, but as I make that up after, I don't know. I don't do it ahead of time. Chemotherapy kills. They have a study that shows that the people who start at 50%, folks, 50% don't make the 30 days. If we didn't also already know that, I'm just saying that this is now the official, right, acknowledgement. Common sense of it, natural observation's not good enough for these people, but now the experts say now it's good enough, and it should be good enough for you. And I'm suggesting that those of you that are interested step up. What is it, Rick Simpson, is that his name? Have to exile himself to Europe? Because the governments will come after him? And this is understood now? 50% of the people die under state certification? That's state murder. We can go on. Don't think it's not part of the plan, okay? But anyway, we have a voice. We have a word in our mouth. We have a pen to write, a paper. We have computers now. Most amazing technology. I could never do what I've done in writing things in papers if it wasn't for a computer, notwithstanding how just time-consuming they can be when things don't go right or someone wants to mess with you. But, man, it's not hard anymore. I was just talking to one of the miners. He comes in and he has a problem across the room. I'm telling him how he's got a letter written, so I was enthused that he had his own letter written, but I fine-tuned it for him, and he got all confused about the law I'm using. It says, just copy and paste. Go to this section of law, copy this part, and print it, paste it right into your document. You don't even have to work hard now. It's really so simple in a way. It's really the tedious, some of the tedium is gone. And for myself, not really knowing how to type, I do okay. I actually type faster, one finger at a time. That's been a godsend, all right? So copy and paste is a cool thing, especially when you can rely on it, because the other side has to rely on it. Again, in Kin.com's streaming thing, I encourage you, it takes a lot of time, I have it playing in the background, to listen to the Queen's Counsel explain the position, not Kim.com's position, but someone who's a co-defendant, to explain him methodically, go through the statutes, and show how the U.S. judge was completely just a criminal. And how you methodically use the black and white, as I've told you, to protect yourself and show how extensive due process is really supposed to work, is an ongoing lesson, even for me, reminding me to keep focused on the thing I've been telling you. The black and white is what that system has to follow. It's their Bible. It doesn't mean that you're going to get justice. In fact, and I don't know the other, it's I think Illingsworth or something is his name, QC, Queen's Counsel, that he has to argue what he's arguing in that a court of review is a crime. When you hear how he's laying out what wasn't done initially in a very weird type of extradition case, it's kind of odd generally. But as he relates it to everything else that ought to be, and has been, and is where there's supposed justice and substantial justice, I would say, where most everything was worked out in the proper way, you can hear and get instruction on what I've been saying has been so important to do. That these laws that everyone says don't exist, I'm telling you, I've always said, do not deny the authority, even if it's an authority from your perspective. That is their Bible. And if you don't understand that, you're missing the big clue. Again, just quickly, how did I show through our paperwork and our case in writing that the court had no authority? It wasn't on my say. I just put the remedy in to make sure that authority was on the record, and they couldn't put it. They say they didn't have authority. I didn't even have to work hard. Now, there was a lot of hard work ahead of time to figure out that that I had to do that and how to do that so that we would interfere with any evasion that they might bring. But they didn't even try to evade. I guess it's how clearly the point was established. Again, copy and paste, and you get them to say. If they don't say and you said it, and you've said enough to make your cause, you've explained your prima facie point to your harm, and they can't answer. They've agreed they've harmed you on that point and for those reasons. You have the power to do the same, even if you're not party. You can cause yourself to be joined to a case as indispensable to the outcome, or because that case is going to affect you without input, and the parties that are in there are not arguing the right points, are not presenting the right case, and the judge is making decisions based on things not put in that are part of your problem, that need to be part of the case, or you do it as an amicus, or one of two of a couple more remedies that you can see. That when I read these stories about chemotherapy, and I just listen to what they're saying, I've told you before that this is a generic application. You see the violation in one subject matter area is applicable with adjustments in about every other subject matter area that hasn't been determined correctly. Okay, so my thought right there, real quickly, the flash is, so now you're understanding how to slowly come onto the fact that this is a plan. The crime against you is a plan, because one method of many, there's a lot more, but the one I keep telling you to use is broad spectrum. It's a spectrum side against their corruption. It's broad spectrum control, check, I should say, not control, but check on what they have been getting away with. I just sit here, my mind just kind of goes quiet. I say, if you understood what I just said and I started doing, I would really have nothing more to say. We would be communicating on your next strategy. I mean, that's really where it would reduce, because you're actually then taking what I'm saying and solving, at least, like I said, at least you gum up the works. And in a way that's doesn't jeopardize you, like a lot of us maybe got into before. So here we have this cancer cure. The chemotherapy is not going to work. Provable now as a study. You think these studies would have been done beforehand? They're not, proving that this is not about your health, and they're only going to, again, it's only treatment. And the bottom line, so much so that the word cure is like antimatter to these people. And Rick Simpson has no trouble saying cure. That should be a clue, folks. And I don't see many people bringing these things forward. Here's another view, and I guess cancer is a big problem, but there's a lot behind all this, and when you find out those same vaccines that the judge wants to continue have evidence of having monkeypox from a long time ago in it that do cause cancer, you just wonder what the beginning and the end, where's the chicken and the egg in this stuff. But here we have, after the fact, we don't know when this cancer starts or why. We have ideas. And to me, it's just an immune system dysfunction, and then a cellular anomaly dysfunction that they continue to tell us is something that we generate. Wasn't happening quite so much a long time ago that it certainly is now, like lots of things. Our life under chemistry, I guess, is what they were telling us. It was going to be a better life for the profiteers, and the privateers, but not for the people. We weren't quite savvy to all that. That scientists might have accidentally found a cure for cancer. When I saw the word cure on here, I was, wow. They use the antimatter word. But then you read how they think they're going to do it. Interesting stuff. I mean, again, I've got a duality. I just think this is all, what our little monkey minds come up with and look and finally observe what's always been before us is really kind of fun. I'd really get into all that. Finally becoming aware of the reality that we're in. A little bit better knowledge as we go through, wondering by the end of our life, what little bit I did find out, all the other I didn't. But scientists might have accidentally found a cure for cancer, showing that we have no clue. But a cure? Scientists might have accidentally made a huge step forward in the search. No, it's a search for a cure for cancer, discovering unexpectedly, experts say, We don't know what we're doing, but we're here to tell you about it. We're here to tell you all about it. Discovering unexpectedly that a malaria protein could be an effective weapon against the disease. Danish researchers, howdy sir, howdy flash. You should have been reporting on this one. It was right there in your backyard. And tell us whether or not the inside knowledge back there is this is a big joke or not. But there's a malarial protein that they've isolated. Danish researchers were hunting for a way to protecting pregnant women from malaria, which can cause huge problems because it attacks the placenta. But they found at the same time that armed malaria proteins can attack cancer too. An approach which could be a step towards curing the disease. Now, to me, curing means it never pops up, but let's notwithstanding all this, let's go ahead with the propaganda here on the pump and dump. But we just came from the fact that now chemotherapy is a 50-50 shot coming out of the gate. We may have to be looking for something else, and sure enough, it pops up. The scientists have found that in both cases, the malaria protein attaches itself to the same carbohydrate. It is the similarities between those two things that the cure could exploit. The carbohydrate ensures that the placenta grows quickly, but the team behind carbohydrate makes you grow quickly makes an interesting correlation between people that come from other countries when they come to America and they grow like twice as big. Kind of like the steroidal Tweety. For those of you old folks knowing about Sylvester and the Tweety bird. He must have had a high carbohydrate diet. But the team behind the new findings have detailed how it serves the same function in tumors, and the malaria parasite attaches itself to the cancerous cells in the same way, meaning that it can kill them off. The scientists said that they have been searching for a long time for a way to exploit similarities between the placenta and a tumor. Cancer breakthrough was revealed where they say that for decades scientists have been searching for similarities between the growth of placenta and tumor. Ali Salanti from University of Copenhagen, remember that? All from the same place. The placenta is an organ which within a few months grows from only a few cells into an organ weighing approximately 2 pounds, and it provides the embryo with oxygen and nourishment in a relatively foreign environment. In a manner of speaking, tumors do the same thing. They grow aggressively in a relatively foreign environment. Anyway, interesting discussion. Now here comes the next, cure, utilizing the malaria parasite. See, they first start out with a protein, then they go to the actual parasite. So, not sure where this is going to go lead, but when they're running out of a problem, they now have a study that says half y'all on chemo are going to die within 30 days. They're going to have to come up with some alternative. Whether this is it or not, I don't know. I think Griggs Simpson may actually have it for some cancers, if not all. I don't know. So why aren't we looking at that? And why do the agencies of government fail to look out at historic uses as a use for you? See, they're only talking about systemic uses, and I'm not so sure that they have the right to condemn your private uses. They only have the right to ratify, certify what their doctors are going to do to you. I don't know of any place that they have the right to interfere with what you want to do to yourself, and I don't know that anybody is really arguing that point quite right, and with an understanding that who they're going to argue it with is someone that doesn't care about you. Different problem. So cure, antimatter is on the way. In a way, I hope so, folks, because we got to have something to fight what they're doing to us, if that can do it. But interesting, nonetheless. Just heads up, those of you that may have to look at this. Maybe you want to go down to Africa, have a nice vacation, and come down with malaria. Now, on the point of the DEA moving along, doing their thing, getting rid of, putting, I guess, apparently, I haven't looked into this, they have authority to cause any substance to go onto a Schedule 1, no medical use condition. The DEA knew the story came through right after the cannabis thing. The DEA is now placing kratom and mitragynine on Schedule 1. Came through the Twitter sphere, I think it was, to give us a heads up. I really wasn't really paying too much attention. Again, this plant is I think out of Asia. I don't have any need of it, or haven't really dealt with it at all. So it's not really a thing in my interest directly. Except here's another plant that's been enjoyed millennia of use by people, going to be made outlaw. And when you see what it does, it's probably because it again hits the bottom line. But I was going to take too much interest, but then someone that I think I know, or not know, I don't know, I've never met him or talked with him, but I think he's a broadcaster on UCY.TV. He wrote an article, he's all into it. So, then I said, well, maybe he's got some energy into it. He makes some findings here and there. He's trying to call to arms, over this thing. And, okay, well, we have someone that wants to try and do something. And so I said, okay, we'll talk maybe more on the broadcast. I don't know if what he's got going will work or not, but I do know that on the administrative side, everyone can get involved at relatively no cost, a whole lot less than what I'll bring up here in a moment, what he's going to help promote, which is asking for a lot of donations up front. So that's a decision you can make. But the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency has filed a notice of intent to place the Southeast Asian plant called kratom to the most restrictive classification of the Controlled Substance Act. The plant Mitragynina speciosa and its two primary constituents, mitragynine and 7-hydroxymitragynine, will be temporarily placed on Schedule 1 on September 30th, according to the filing of the DEA at 8:45 Eastern Time a few days ago. The full announcement is scheduled to be published in the Federal Register on August 31st, so this is coming a little late, but there's a 30-day window for y'all that are interested, even just to get involved, even if you are just want to look for something to start to practice how. You are in a time frame to respond to this. As the notice of intent, there's a link to it, will explain. And I'll just tell you, they have some very specific questions they want asked, and you'll have to pretty much stick to that unless you can trump the narrowness of the question, which I think you can do, but you have to frame it in that way. But you have here with this thing, you have the ability to jump in and file a comment. And when you go to the Federal Register, it'll tell you all pretty much who you do it and what they're asking for. And yes, it's going to take a study. And yes, you have to invest some time, but I think it's valuable because I think I know these are one of the ways that we are using, not necessarily with the DEA, but with other federal agencies, and it works with state agencies, to truly interfere with their abilities to do certain things. As I think it was Gary L. had posted, and I'm sorry, Gary, I don't remember now what it was. It just flashed away from my mind that he's talking about in similar regard of I think it might have been a slightly different issue, jumping in with addressing these agencies, giving you standing now to fight them tooth and nail over what they're trying to do. And this is where I told you a long time ago, if each one of us did something, that we have the numbers to keep up with the pile and heap that comes out of these agencies that we complain about become legislation that no one can read. We have the ability to step in here that here it is, folks. It's a 30-day or whatever, the September 30th it goes on. They say it's temporary. You have to read. You really have to sit down and read what they're saying. You have to kind of address what they want to have addressed. I have found you can address things outside the scope if the scope did not include the proper comprehensiveness regarding what they have the authority to do. You can pry into that pretty well. But as a action alert, Brian Tuberville came up with someone passed this around, and I just picked it up and attached it to this segment. Help stop DEA's attack on kratom. So my whole interest was really more here's someone who wants to do something. If you want to jump in, I don't even know anything about it. I don't know the first thing about what all that would be and why it would be wrong. I just see now that the DEA has been, they're certainly not stopping taking away plants, natural plants. I don't know about these substances, but how they can outlaw the entire plant when you haven't manufactured just the substance is really always been a wonder to me, and that might make part of your discussion. But Turbeville, I should say. Excuse me. The DEA has recently made an emergency decision. You can challenge that, to place Kratom on Schedule 1 and list of controlled substances. Find more information about the issue here. He's got links. What you can and need to do. So he's got his list of what you can and need to do. I've been saying that you should be doing this at all, but he's added there's a whole lot more going on. I don't know the efficacy of all of this. My focus would be strictly on the agency doing this and getting standing to go into a court battle on my own, making sure my arguments were placed. Or you can support the American Kratom Association in their upcoming legal battle with civil liberties and health freedom, if that's the angle you want to go. And then sign a petition if you want to do that. Contact the relevant authorities and make your voice heard. If you're going to sign a petition, folks, it'd be better to research. Forget the White House petition. It'd be better to address the agency directly with the proper process. And what I'm saying here again, and he's got a whole bunch of people to send lots of letters to. You can decide on whether you want to engage yourself in that regard. My thought, just a quick perusal, I didn't go too deeply in this, is that the main thing is this is an agency notice of intent to take an action which has a direct response you can jump in with. You may be good to jump in league with people, but don't forget your own power. So you can contact Brandon. He's got links and things to get involved. So in one regard, very good. He's on the leading edge of pulling finding people and pulling people together to work together. I just wanted to say that the more important point that I can see, instead of going to too many places, is just go ahead and hit that DEA. Just go to the notice of intent and see what it is that they're asking for, and then make the question to yourself: is that comprehensive enough to give that agency the decision power to make that decision, or is the decision what they're asking too narrow, and it will cause their decision to be arbitrary and capricious? And that gives you standing to then, in the near future possibly, to step into a court of law. And for those of you that have no money, I've said, you just go and form a papyrus, and the so-called court of law would be the so-called district court, those administrative courts. You don't worry about that. What you want to do is you want to jump in and you get practice on how to do this. You file your on-point, meaningful comment that addresses their issue and then outs them maybe where they failed. And to make more time, you can actually do that. Make more time to respond. Maybe the process wasn't, this emergency was, they had plenty of time to not make it an emergency as a response. You go to, if they want to go past that, if they want to go past your comment, they want to institute this, you can sue to enjoin the implementation of the Schedule 1 listing until further and more adequate administrative process would be a nice exercise without any jeopardy to anyone. If they disregard you, you have the chance to go to the court. If you got no money, you can go and form a papyrus. If you got the money, maybe make yourself look a little bit more important with the money, or you can help to tie up with some of these people that are going to be putting the money and wait for you maybe to join a case. Now, you're going to have some costs if you don't go and form a papyrus, so think that through. My point here is you try to make a comment that keeps the agency from actually making the determination until it has fully complied with the requirements of the law regarding its ability to schedule anything. While I would be at it when I said that, I would actually find the fraud in the prior decision, and as a side concept, I would be talking about the marijuana, that they didn't look at all this other information and do a short bullet point list on how they came to that decision arbitrarily and capriciously. Now, there's a couple of other standards. It's not just arbitrary and capricious. There's a standard of meeting the law. There's a standard that would be contrary to law. There's a couple of different standards. You could research to find out what you're supposed to speak to. I'm asking you to, here's another point. If you missed that, I don't know that you missed out on the cannabis one. I think that's still open and viable. This one's ripe, so here it is. You take the findings of other people if you don't have them yourself. We have the way to leverage our own work as tag team offenses in this matter. What they are coming to take more regular plants away from us that I absolutely don't understand. I've read what they're supposed to do. I've read some people who tried to take it. I also know that taking herbs is a people by people experience by just how it works. Nobody can report to you how it works for you. They might give you some ideas on how they responded, which might be relevant, pertinent to what you need to know, material to how you move it forward. But I've found that herbs are a private type of enterprise on your own endeavor, of your own decision and guidance. And you might want to take wise counsel from people who've been there before, certainly. But ultimately, it's taking full responsibility for your health, that they're taking away another tool for those of you that may know what this is about, that may in the future may even need it. Better than taking the certified chemotherapy or whatever it does, and 50% chance that it'll kill you. That's what the government licenses, folks, if you haven't figured it out. It's I got to crack up. It's insane. You're trying to have a rationale against insanity. I've been telling people this last week. You can't do that. Don't make a question and don't have a discussion and cause a question when you're dealing with insane people. You can't do it. It's not possible. So for those of you that think that those of you that partake in marijuana, as it's listed in this next report, and you think your non-activity is going to help you, here's another, hopefully an impetus for those of you. I could care less what the subject matter is. I want people involved. I want to hear people, swinging the bat for the fences here, doing that one-shot home run just because they were involved. And if you're not, you keep swinging. You figure out another way to swing, as I have. I looked around. I saw a lot of people taking that knuckleball. I'm not going to take that knuckleball. I'm going to try I'm going to hit a different thing. You got to look and see what other people have done with a group of people working. You can see that. You can each come in individually, work a different angle to see what's working and what's not, how they're violating you if that's what goes on, and how to plug up any weaknesses. U.S. court upholds ban on gun sales to marijuana card holders is a real serious deal with respect to how you see the government piggyback and leverage their authority and their imposition on simple acts that you would think are actually valid for you to do. Just having a marijuana card holder now allows the government to infringe on your right to defend yourself and defend yourself against the government is an interesting theory. Coming out of the Ninth Circuit here, remember that's a circuit, an appeals court for territorial courts that has a 71% failure rate on those cases that make it to the Supreme Court in appeal. A federal ban on sale of guns to medical marijuana card holders does not violate the Second Amendment, a federal court of appeals said Wednesday. The ruling of the Ninth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals applies to the 9 western states that fall under the court's jurisdiction, including California, Washington, and Oregon. And that would be a very interesting question. How does that territorial court's jurisdiction cause the de jure states of California, Washington, and Oregon come under that authority? Would be a very interesting question for one of you all to go ask. See, it's an appellate court over an appeal review of territorial court decisions that our court case in 2013 found are not competent to hear even territorial matters. Can I get just a crew of 10 of you to ask that question of this? Clarify your order, Ninth Circuit. How are these cases, this case of Jefferson Mining District versus Kitzhopper, and showing that your senior judge had no authority in a court that doesn't exist for the purpose over territories that don't exist within the state? How does your ruling affect us in the state? I'm not going to say you're going to get an answer, but you certainly got the question out that won't get the answer that's going to raise a couple eyebrows. But anyway, it came in a lawsuit filed by S. Rowan Wilson, a Nevada woman who said that she tried to buy a firearm for self-defense in 2011 after obtaining a medical marijuana card. The gun store refused, citing the federal rule banning the sale of firearms to illegal drug users. Marijuana remains illegal under federal law. Remember, I think it was the Supreme Court came out and just said you can't interfere with the marijuana card holder on a statewide level because of its sovereignty. So we're seeing the development of a problem here, which can be we can use the crowbar to get in on it. But this is what the government is saying, that we see the two disparate conditions now where they'll tell you this, and I've never understood it, but they'll impose it upon you, that we have actually two governments on us. And in this subject matter, the two governments have 180-degree divergent conditions, which shows you we don't live in a country of peace anymore either, which is another underlying problem. So on its face, this appeals court of review of a territorial courts that don't actually have establishment or existence over any territory within this state, so-called, unless it may be the ceded lands from the state to the federal government, which is very small places, maybe some federal courts, maybe some dockyards, maybe some military installations, maybe over those. They have no authority over the rest that everyone doesn't realize, actually. And then only limited to firearms. Remember, we've been through this as well. You have the right to bear arms. Firearms is a contortion of that, and it's a very special definition. If you go read the definition of firearms, it doesn't speak to anything other than what's defined, and that doesn't include your pistols and your rifles and all this other stuff. And then only in interstate travel, which means your federal firearms people are federal. So we have lots of things that have mixed up on this. But for those of you that didn't fight, don't step up to protect yourself, that think that the law protects you, in the face of this federal state conundrum, your failure to actually help out in addressing these things when it was easy, when it was in the writing stage, now has become and caused you to be subject to increased criminal liability actually. So word to the wise actually here again as well, but it's one of those things you can possibly engage. Sitting as crickets on these things aren't going to help anybody, and it doesn't give you the expertise as you move along. And we need a lot more people with this expertise on how to out these people, how to get that backbone that we know we should, well, we know we're supposed to have it, that we tend to disagree on, that we think we have and we don't actually. That we are what I call the crickets instead, the people not doing anything they ought to be doing, instead doing everything that they're told to do or not doing because they don't want to be told what they're to do, and also not finding out what they are to do and doing that. That as we don't speak out or we keep engaging with these people, we agree that we buy a firearm instead of just an arm under the Constitution, that a firearm is even relevant to the Second Amendment, I've never understood. When you understand it's a confined description for a certain thing in a certain place over a certain jurisdiction. How that can extend itself into where your state is supposed to have sovereignty, I've really never understood anyway for the purpose. How the occupier has the right to defeat the right you have that the government was prohibited against interfering with shall not be infringed. It doesn't say except for marijuana medical card or medical marijuana card holding. Another one of these things. Your silence against all these this nonsense they put out is allowing the nonsense to be that new normal that gives the government, or those those usurpers in the government, more power, more ability to convince those that aren't even, that are clueless but just accept that they outnumber you. It puts you more in jeopardy. It is all because of your silence. So taking a benefit, we don't understand this linkage that we do, the ring that you put in your nose, and you tie the rope you hand it to someone else, and then you might complain that they're tugging on it. It's really a humorous thing to me. And everybody that's listening to me has done it. I've done it. And yet we don't understand the first thing to start to do to push back, which I've explained, and anybody else knows. Don't participate. It's going to set you in a different class where it's no jeopardy to you. You just don't participate. That's why I tell you I don't get into Facebook. I didn't even make the decision to get on YouTube. But we have an account on YouTube that goes from the Spreaker. What I'm talking about is taking the benefit of someone else's website function. And a long time ago I've told you need to read your terms of use statements. And when I did, I realized I really didn't want to engage much at all with the internet. In fact, even I could see it in the domain registration. In fact, we had a major problem one year over a registrar trying to steal our domains. And I had to go, that's when I started to see the deck is stacked. But this was after I realized that the internet was not private and you could not make it so. So that's not a surprise either. But it's writing on the wall when you engage these benefits. Understand the corporations are really extensions. Clint Richardson's Corporation Nations. The impetus of the existence is authorized by the state, which is authorized by the federal government, because they're all in commerce, and they're all authorized as corporations. Being corporations. Don't get all flipped out about that corporation stuff. As I was talking to someone, you get in land disposal, it doesn't matter what their status is. They have no power and authority, and they can show no power, authority, or title to interfere with you. So I don't care what the status is. I don't make a big deal of it. I want to see your right, your title, your warrant to interfere, if you have any. And if you make it up and you claim an authority, that's a felony. So let's go ahead. Come to me with a lie. See, I don't care. It doesn't matter. I don't take a big deal about this. But these actual corporations are getting the impetus of their existence from another corporation now. Before it was the de jure state, in a different capacity as well, these corporations. But when you involve yourself with a foreigner, and you've agreed, I don't know what the big complaint was, that YouTube says now, no to sexual humor, profanity, partial nudity, political conflict, and sensitive subjects in partner content. Didn't know you were in a partner content on YouTube, did you? Well, let's go find out about that partner content a little bit. I'm not going to go too much on this. I just find it fascinating, the big scream that's going on. A YouTube party is over has been an internet tag. And I'm saying, what party was over? The fact that you were getting paid to put your stuff on? Would you think they weren't monetizing that to a greater degree so they could pay you? Who's telling who a story here? Content creators mourn the platform's terms of service for monetized videos. So there it is again, folks, the bottom line. You know, this is really not censorship. What it is censorship. C-E-N-T-S. Censorship. Because they only give you cents per click, don't they? That if they don't like what you are saying, they won't pay you no more. Did you expect anything else? And if you did, you're not paying attention to your agreement when you took the benefit that they have to offer, first of all. Secondly, you're all mourning about not being paid. And yet you'll put that in a free speech context. You said free speech. You're not supposed to be paid for that. And so you have the speech they won't pay for now, which is like me walking into your house and trying to tell you how you're going to talk. Oh, no, it's not. You walked into their house and you're trying to tell them how to talk. Oh, you want to get paid for it. So we got to get all this whole little thing is about how they're being censored, but it's censor. You've sold out before for cents what they made dollars on. And now you're complaining you're not going to get your crumbs. Talk about selling your rights for a bowl of pottage. We're so screwed up in how we perceive things that you realize this is only for monetization. They don't apparently, even under their terms of service, have much control if they don't pay you. If commerce is not involved, they have a problem apparently because they didn't shut that down. If you want to come like I do and a lot of people I know and don't get paid, see, a long time ago I realized this payment on stuff was an inducement, an enticement of servitude. For as much as I could use the remuneration, I will not accept it through these people because they're criminals, actually. They're opportunists if I don't say they're criminals because they get you to consent. So calling them criminals may be a little bit, it is a lot far. I shouldn't have said that. They're allowing us access for those that have the time, don't want monetization. But to ask for monetization and say the party is over when they start cutting, and unless you say what master agrees with, is really the height of hypocrisy. The online video monarch, they tell you folks, I mean, it's right here. Why you have a complaint, I don't know. Live in the kingdom and then complain against the king? The online video monarch just released new, publicized rules prohibiting everything from sexual humor to any depiction of drug use to, so, quote, sensitive topics such as politics and war, and it's, quote, advertiser-friendly video content. If it's not a Christian music video, a beauty vlog, or a hamster on a piano, it's probably a no-no under YouTube's newly clarified terms of service for anyone hoping to monetize, make sense of your speech. It's supposed to be free. They're paying you. What's your complaint? But at any rate, monetize their channel. I don't know if that list wouldn't seem to be fair. Everything's fair game depending on what the master you've asked to benefit for would say. I guess the humor in this, to me, it's not really so funny. It just shows how many people don't know how to look at something. I guess don't have a critical thought in their brain of what their actions do versus the consequence. I have not attempted to do my own YouTube account at all because of these conditions. That we have one at RLM. If it disappeared, it's there, folks, for you. Go use it while you can. But if it goes away, it's like everything else in my life. When I'm gone, this life goes away. There's no guarantees. And you bring yourself subject to someone else, what's your complaint? And I'm not the only one saying this. Don't think I'm not saying this because I have the definitive voice. Lots of other clear-thinking people have seen this and are not surprised. That I see people that are known to be followed by a lot of people saying, oh, I'm going to have to now adjust what I say. That's censorship. C-E-N-T-S-orship. You are agreeing to sell out for a few cents a click, if that much. I don't even know that it's that much. I don't know what it is. In order to self-censor to what Master says. And I hear people listening to these people and taking what they say as principled. It's laughable what we do. It's why I asked Grimner, can we do these things on our servers? And I know that's his server, his service. I say I take this as ours. What we try to do. Whenever something comes along, can we put this on our servers so we can have some protection of it, we can have some possession of it, so we're not subject to this nonsense. We're going to have to start really thinking that way. That we've had an outcry about this is really kind of humorous at one level, but it's a hypocrisy on the other. And what is your free speech? If it was free speech, what are you expecting monetization for it anyway? It's kind of I don't even know where. And if you're in the monetization, where do you think you placed yourself? Not only in the constraint of the master, who you expect payment from, and this master-employee relationship, apparently, this contractual agreement where they hold all the cards. This is like an arbitration clause using your dang phone. But you want to get paid for it, and then you want to complain after you've agreed? This is a big dissonance in us, big time. That I'm now looking at, why am I even spending more time on it? Except that I see this dissonance is hurting us, and it gets in our way, in a big way, and in ways that we are not truly aware of as people. I looked at some comments that were coming through. I'm going to have to adjust my statements, my website, my audio, my videos. Who are you then? Who are you? What was your real intent? Do you want people to know, or do you want to make money? What little crumbs they hand you? A long time ago, I realized that somehow this thing wasn't. Maybe I realized money is not for me. Maybe not that I don't. It's not like I put my mind on not having money, but it wasn't something I threw that down. That need to grab that way a long time ago. That none of these inducements really have a lot of hold on me. And if you have any of that in you, that's part of one of the ropes they have on the ring in your nose. But to agree to the use, and then complain that the rules got changed, and then agree to change your content, is not censorship. It's censorship. You'll take a pittance for your 2 cents worth instead of not monetizing and not worrying about it. Architect of the New World Order. If you don't see, that's another New World Order coming on. That's Google too, folks, if you haven't figured that all out with YouTube. Architect of New World Order is giving up on America's empire. If you don't understand how fickle this whole thing is, this is a fascinating insight, a story that came through. Architect of the New World Order is giving up on America's empire. Most notoriously, as I'm cutting into the middle of this discussion, most notoriously, Big News Brzezinski. Big News Brzezinski was instrumental in providing assistance to Afghan's Mujahideen fighters who were battling the Soviet invasion. Parenthetically, these fighters became the bulk of the Al-Qaeda, Al-CIA, and included Osama bin Laden. He was also a strong advocate. This Big News Brzezinski was also a strong advocate of NATO expansion in the face of Vladimir Putin's rise to power in Russia. However, Big News Brzezinski appears to have abandoned his former fears of Russia and has shifted his attitude to adapt. Didn't want to mess that word up, and I did. I blinked. He shifted his attitude to adapt. For those of you listening to me about sustainable development and the method, that's a critical word. Let me go back and start this more over. Big News Brzezinski appears to have abandoned his former fears of Russia and has shifted his attitude to adapt to 5 main developments, which he concedes are redistributing global political power. Then the report lists them. I won't go through that. I want to point out something here that just floored me a bit. And this is the fickleness of this thing, and this is the psychopathy we live in, and this is the cockistocracy we live. This is an admission that this guy's advice to the unqualified one and whomever before was wrong and failed and caused the 5 things that will be listed that are now shifting power from the United States to defeat it, actually. It is the definition of why it went wrong and what went wrong. That this guy should be brought up for treason. and ought to give us an insight of who we have really making the determinations about how this works. He agrees that his plan, he had no plan. As Obama told, we have got no plan A. This proves it. This is a theory that failed. And now they have to shift now to what? A new world order. Out with the old new world order plan, in with the new one, with the same fallen mentality. As it says, however, big news, Brzezinski still posits that the U.S. must take the lead in realigning this global power structure by elaborating on the 5 aforementioned developments. Folks, we're going down the tubes. We've lost credibility as a nation. We misuse the power. We're bullies and brutes. We've been called out for it. And people are not stupid in the world, not as stupid as the buffoons in Washington think. They are realigning. And this joker just thinks he can be cause the United States to have some force and effect on elaborating this point. This is a treason, folks, if we haven't seen it before. This guy has been a go-to guy, no different than Kissinger, who many people call a war criminal. And what I've seen, I really couldn't, if I was a jury looking on the information I've had, I couldn't disagree. These are the people that have risen to the top, complete failures, that we see by their own words the failure. That what he was after before, what he guided the United States to do by the methods, failed. And they're going to now change to try and pick up the pieces that appear to me to not be able to be picked up. Unless you want to go to more and badder war. As in the same week we also hear now, for those of you who have a short memory, I'm sorry, you're not putting this together. You're not going to put this together, and I don't know what to do about that. Maybe go back through some history lessons and read a little bit quicker in the span of 15 minutes. But this was predictable. These things were tools to get us into the place that we are, which was big news, Brzezinski's big news for us, that he now agrees has been failed. United States government says it's no longer against Al-CIA, duh. It was a fabrication and tool of the CIA. It was never against it. And now we see the truth. And yet everyone forgets that this was the excuse that got us from 2000 until today, also through the economic destruction I told you is forever being underneath the content of all this stuff. The global financial power struggle, if you will, underneath the skin of it all. That the United States, for all of y'all that haven't heard, the United States officially says it's no longer against Al-CIA, duh. We are not focused on the former al-Nusra Front, Al-CIA, duh, in Syria. We're focused on Daesh, or is. Remember I said that's is us. No distinction, no difference. The same method, keep changing the name of the target, and everyone doesn't understand that the bouncing ball, the song's lyrics that the bouncing ball is bouncing over is always the same lyrics. So now we're focused on is, like they haven't been. It's is us, United States. It's a tool. Nothing to get go right home about. Strawberry fields forever. And that's what we're fighting, and that's where therefore we look and where we're targeting, or where we target, says the United States Defense Department. Central to America's war against terrorism, it's the war of terror. It's not a war against the Al-CIA, if you haven't figured it out. Now that the United States is not focused on it, is what started this whole thing, that starts the focus, which actually undermines the power of the president to do anything, because the laws of Congress only focus on certain entities. They've actually stepped themselves out of any legitimate authority if they were ever operating under. Al-CIA is being the target, a specific target, but on August 16th, U.S. Defense Department spokesman said that the Al-CIA is no longer an enemy of the United States at all, and that only is America's enemy in the war on against terrorism. So, is us, is Al-Qaeda, is. What is. You're hearing the United States also answer at the same time. Big news, Brzezinski's big news is, I failed y'all. Let's go try this new plan. The United States says we're going to abandon this, and it appears to me that there's a geopolitical pivot now, which we really are moving up into the Ukraine. The United States has got its feet all muddied up. I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I think we're seeing this. There's another pivot going on. Turkey saw it coming through Putin, I think, however that worked out. We are really focusing. This is the psychopath Brzezinski. He's got another plan. He's going after Russia. They're probably going to go through Ukraine. But is and Al-Qaeda, they're a tool. And that name will be changing until you're tired of it and say something about it. So underneath the cover of all this terror that was on us and going to befall us, and all these tools they use against us to gain our confidence that what they're doing is correct to protect us. And please don't ever forget when they agreed that they brought Battlefield to America, that we had Battlefield America. You're looking at everyone who allowed that in breach of their office or employment to the people of the United States. They are committing treason to continue. When Battlefield America hit the land, they failed. We are not protected. Actually, the people have every right to stand up, notwithstanding the Ninth Circuit decision that medical marijuana card holder is not supposed to have a gun in his defense or the defense of his nation against their decisions. Because these same judges and bar members are the ones that are making these decisions to continue and allow the extrajudicial use of the war as an excuse to defeat you. When they allowed the enemy onto Battlefield America by calling your land a battlefield, they violated the law. They violated their oath, and they became the enemy of the people that you think is being fought by them, is them. Is us. Not us, them. On a plan that Big News Brzezinski just told you the big news about. He was wrong. Upon this, people go down. Remember all the FBI stuff that goes on underneath the color of the war of terror against you. So again, as I see this connecting up, but this happened before, news to us if you hadn't heard. The FBI FBI evidence proves innocence of accused Boston Marathon bomber Dzhokhar Tsarnaev. FBI evidence proves innocence of accused Boston Marathon bomber. Couple of interesting things on this story. This is by Paul Craig Roberts. Paul Craig Roberts, yes. While they have this war of terror against you, they made people in this country terrorists to promote their war of terror against you. And you all believed it. Some of you didn't. But I'm talking the generality. I told you before, you listened to the Kim.com case in the Queen's Counsel for another party, co-party, discussing how all the due process failures that were going on, and due process considers, you want to have a process that would seek justice. And a lot of the things he talks about is the candor of the government's proposition, that's the truthfulness of it, and that the appearance of justice must be done. It must be important. You see the aspiration of law sitting there, but you see the fulfillment failed in the fact that he exists. That this report says the same thing. Within the process and all the case, and we saw the duplicitousness of the government anyway, but this speaks to the failure of the jury as well. And I was telling you earlier about you have a right to come in sometimes to correct things. And this is another evidence of how that is. So if you get this story, I'd like you to read it for the fact of what you can do as it's not such an outsider, but if you can make yourself tangible to have standing to say, or as that friend of the court, you can inquire even after the fact. That this report here that says that when you see more of the facts that were not brought in, and that in this case, Tsarnaev's aunt is an attorney in another country getting leave to come in and expose these failures. She speaks with an authority about the failures that, when you hear about it, puts a whole different twist on this. They actually spoke to something I observed but couldn't prove. I wasn't there. I just saw the same videos I was telling you about. She actually exposes the very simple, identifiable thing in the evidence that the jury overlooked that would exonerate him absolutely. I was going to read about this a little bit. It'd take a little bit to set up. I want you really to read it. I need you to see the words. But I can summarize it this way. That as an attorney, a lawyer in her country, looking at the evidence of her nephew, I think it is, and watching the conviction, she recognized in the videos by the conundrum, by the video of him showing him going down the sidewalk, the conundrum created, the prima facie evidence that he could not have been the bomber because the evidence the FBI produced at trial was, and I saw that picture, and that's when I asked the question, where did he get the black knapsack? The FBI says that a black knapsack did contain the bomb of 2, and yet the video of him walking down the sidewalk, he's got a cream color off-white one. There's no evidence, and she says by affidavit, again what you have to produce, that she had to then find an attorney in this country, almost every attorney of which was afraid to allow anybody else into this case for fear of being attacked, which shows you another control underneath the skin that you've never heard about probably. She finally found one attorney that would take her affidavit on and submit it to get into the court for leave to present this obvious fact, mischaracterizing the evidence that convicted her nephew. That there was, and she goes through it, that there's no evidence other than the FBI's assertions that a black knapsack was done, yet the evidence of the videos clearly show her nephew had a white one. It proves that he did not have the knapsack that caused the bombing. It's something you have to go look and read how she did it. You understand how if you can do things like this yourself, what it takes to very clearly at things and just make the statement that went through a jury and got disregarded. The judge of which didn't look at the jury and says, "What? You made a big mistake." No, you see the judge in on it. As well as this is the case where the defense attorney came out and says he's guilty. Opening statement, he's guilty. And yet his aunt doesn't have to be the attorney back there, but I think this made a little bit of cause in the system, a quake in the system of the rule o' laws. That she makes the simple observation, but he never had a black knapsack, is evidence to you of the abject corruption of your system, not to say, oh yeah, I know that, what'd you expect? No, these are the obviousnesses that you will be brought under, these corruptions and criminalities that even a jury won't save you from. That we have the opportunity in this proof to question the entirety of the system in with even more force and effect. Give ourselves a platform to tell more people, this is what you can expect from your system. This is what you can expect from your fellow jurors. Remember, they're only pulled from pools of citizens of the United States subject to exactions of every kind too. They're part of the prison population. They're part of the insane, the inmates in the insane asylum, the open air prison. They're all part of this. And so they're like the crabs in the bucket we hear. You can't crawl out as a crab of buckets because the ones in the bottom will reach up and pull you back in. So this underlies a lot of this. Forget your jury, as I guess one of the points. But also look very, very clearly that it took one woman to step up and say, wait, you all got it wrong. There's no evidence that my nephew ever had a possession of a black knapsack, the one the FBI said contained the bomb. In a way, it's earth-shaking to me, just the clarity of that observation. How many people didn't step up to protect someone who was being alleged to be a murderer, a bomber? But you see the system tied into the propagation of the war of terror against you. And we all look at this, well, I say we all, not all of us, but we all look at this as a society and think it's correct. I mean, I didn't know what the evidence was. I didn't know where they were going to come up with their knapsacks, but when I saw the kid coming around the corner in the video, I said, but he has a white knapsack on. That's a grayish color. I mean, it's not black. Where does he get, does his brother or cousin have the black knapsack? I didn't know. I was wondering, it didn't dawn on me over time when we don't hear, we're not there, that no evidence was produced of the white knapsack even, except that video. So there was never actually a black knapsack possessed by either one that was ever brought into evidence. And her statement, her affidavit, her willingness to come across the country, in fact, she has to make stipulation that you're going to have to pay me and give me safe passage there and back. If you don't think we're in a serious moment that an attorney has to ask for protection to come to the country to testify and to leave and be free to go back, that should be shocker to you as well. She actually brings that up, and I said, yeah, you're right. She has to do that. No different. I've told you before, you make certain allegations, you better make those reservations in your statement when you find out you're an enemy combatant as presumption. You have to make some assurances on the record with the captor. She makes them. She is going to be it's a voice that no one else was, folks, as I'm asking you to be that one voice possibly in the future for the wrongs you see that need to be made right. You could be that one simple voice of clarity, evidencing the clarity of the error, which shows the corruption of this is the best we can do, question manifest. I can't, again, this injustice is really deeply abiding in me, that people are in jail suffering the system, people in jail for murder that they didn't commit 30 years, folks, 30 years, 35, 37 years, and they never did anything. And this is the best we can do? We better have to step up and fix that part, because it can happen to you, folks. You're walking down the street with a knapsack, next thing you're party to a terrorism event. Can happen to you. And there's no one going to protect you. You better pray you have that aunt to look at the simple proof of the non-proof. Thank you for tuning in today. Hope something I said helps you and inspires you to get involved. Fix those wrongs you need to make right. Grimner, thank you very much for the website, and Grammy Mary for Spreaker, and UCY.TV, Jules, and appreciate that. Terrestrial broadcasters, appreciate what you do to get the broadcast out. Folks, markonthebeach.yahoo.com for any comments or donations, contributions of information to me or questions, and or put out the word. We have a broadcast 2 hours a day that some other broadcaster can simulcast. But thank you very much for tuning in today. I'll be here next week. Tech Diffs are nature willing. Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
That's what opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like. son. You just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.